think about Philip Larkin, we think of a poet of gloom, of pessimism, of disappointment, perhaps of endings. But that's not the entire story. It's not even the accurate story. What Larkin really gives us is something sharper and perhaps more valuable. A voice that tells the truth about ordinary life, without decoration, without illusion. He was born in 1922 in Coventry. He grew up in a household that was at best emotionally reserved, even distant. That sense of distance between people, between what we feel and what we say, never really left him. And our first poem tonight is one that looks back on that childhood in Coventry and the emptiness of memory. It's called I Remember.
Coming up England by a different line for once, early in the cold new year, we stopped, and watching men with number plates sprint down the platform to familiar gates, "Why, Coventry!" I exclaimed. "I was born here." I leant far out and squinted for a sign that this was still the town that had been mine so long, but found I wasn't even clear which side was which. From where those cycle crates were standing, had we annually departed for all those family holes? A whistle went. Things moved. I sat back, staring at my boots. "Was that," my friend smiled, "where you have your roots?" "No, only where my childhood was unspent," I wanted to retort. "Just where I started. By now, I've got the whole place clearly charted. Our garden, first, where I did not invent blinding theologies of flowers and fruits, and wasn't spoken to by an old hat. And here we have that splendid family I never ran to when I got depressed. The boys all biceps and the girls all chest. Their comic Ford, their farm, where I could be really myself. I'll show you, come to that, the bracken where I never trembling sat, determined to go through it, where she lay back and all became a burning mist. And in those offices my doggerel was not set up in blunt 10-point, nor read by a distinguished cousin of the mayor, who didn't call and tell my father, "There before us had we the gift to see ahead." "You look as if you wished the place in hell," my friend said, "judging from your face." "Oh well, I suppose it's not the place's fault," I said. "Nothing like something happens anywhere."
We can hear in Daniel's reading how Larkin dismantles the sentimental idealisation of childhood. Wordsworth used to celebrate the idea of formative memory. The child is the father of the man, he famously said. But Larkin finds nothing remarkable in his own past. He rejects the notion that childhood holds profound meaning. This anti-romantic stance becomes a hallmark of his work, as well as the humour. He studied at Oxford, where he became great friends with Kingsley Amis. After university, he worked as a librarian. Most of his adult life was spent in Hull, far from the metropolitan literary scene, reinforcing his image as a provincial observer of ordinary English life. That reluctance to travel, that resistance to modernist experimentation defined his image and his work. And librarianship and books perfectly suited this outlook. He reflects on the escapist fantasies of youth and those books in this next poem, A Study of Reading Habits.
When getting my nose in a book cured most things, short of school, It was worth ruining my eyes to know I could still keep cool and deal out the old right hook to dirty dogs twice my size. Later, with inch-thick specs, evil was just my lark. Me and my coat and fangs had ripping times in the dark. The women I clubbed with sex, I broke them up like meringues. Don't read much now. The dude who lets the girl down before the hero arrives, the chap who's yellow and keeps the store, seem far too familiar. Get stewed. Books are a load of crap.
Youthful expectation versus adult reality. The poem's movement from romantic illusion to cynical realism mirrors his broader poetic trajectory. And a little more of that cynicism coming up in the next poem. Larkin's poetry is deeply rooted in the social and cultural landscape of post-war England. That was his superpower then. He was of his time. And what a time it was. Immediately after the Second World War, Britain was engulfed in significant transformation. The decline of traditional institutions, the rise of consumer culture, and the gradual erosion of what Larkin saw as our national identity. Some writers would have embraced these changes as signs of progress, but Larkin often responded with scepticism, even melancholy. This old-fashioned conservatism has not gained him any friends, but we cannot deny that Larkin strikes a chord with so much that is going on these days. And this perspective is particularly evident in Going, Going. And when Daniel reads this, listen out for the verse that begins on the business page, and I'll tell you why it's controversial in a moment. So, Going, Going.
I thought it would last my time. The sense that beyond the town there would always be fields and farms where the village louts could climb such trees as were not cut down. I knew there'd be false alarms in the papers about old streets and split-level shopping, but some have always been left so far. And when the old part retreats as the bleak high-rises come, we can always escape in the car. Things are tougher than we are. Just as Earth will always respond, however we mess it about. Chuck filth in the sea if you must. The tides will be clean beyond. But what do I feel now? Doubt or age, simply? The crowd is young in the M1 CAF. Their kids are screaming for more. More houses, more parking allowed, more caravan sites, more pay. On the business page, a score of spectacled grins approve some takeover bid that entails 5% profit and 10% more in the estuaries. Move your works to the unspoilt dales, grey area grants. And when you try to get near the sea in summer, it seems just now to be happening so very fast. Despite all the land left free, for the first time, I feel somehow that it isn't going to last. That before I snuff it, the whole boiling will be bricked in, except for the tourist parts. First slum of Europe. A role it won't be hard to win, with a cast of crooks and tarts. And that will be England. Gone. The shadows, the meadows, the lanes, the guild halls, the carved choirs. There'll be books. It will linger on in galleries. But all that remains for us will be concrete and tires. Most things are never meant. This won't be, most likely. But greeds and garbage are too thick strewn to be swept up now. or invent excuses that make them all needs. I just think it will happen soon.
The poet laureate Simon Armitage examines this poem in his series Larkin Revisited for Radio 4. It's still on the BBC Science platform, and I would recommend it if you get a taste for Larkin. Simon's a Yorkshireman, of course. Larkin, by dint of a life spent in Hull, could, if he wanted to, claim that mantle as well. Simon sees the poem as old-fashioned, the language. We wouldn't use words louts these days. Guildhalls, probably not much in our vocabulary either. But it's also quite a modern poem. The fear of the destruction of the landscape, the disgust at the pouring of filth into the seas, not by day trippers or those louts, but by our water companies. This poem was commissioned by the Department of the Environment in 1972. It was then called Prologue. Larkin was a risky choice by the Ted Heath government of the day. And the verse that begins, "On the business page, a score of spectacled grins," was cut out by the authorities when the poem was submitted for that year's UN Stockholm Environment Conference. It was seen by the government as an attack on the environmental consequences of capitalism. And last year, the Guardian newspaper championed Larkin's writing in this context as a real defender of the British environment. But when Larkin brought out his final collection of poetry in 1974, High Windows, he renamed Prologue Going Going and restored that verse we just heard then. At this stage, we should mention his 3 collections of mature poetry. The first is, well, 4 really. The first is The North Ship, which is largely dismissed as juvenilia, including, I must say, by Larkin himself. One critic recently described it thus: "This is the verse of a young man who wants to become a poet by sounding like a known poet." A bit unkind, perhaps, but his 3 mature collections, The Less Deceived, 1955, 10 years later, The Whitsun Weddings, and finally, in 1974, The High Windows. This is a very sparse output on which to rest such a colossal reputation. And it's because after 1974, when no new poems came, he felt finally when the position of Poet Laureate was offered, he could not accept it because, as he said, poetry had abandoned him. Let's go now to one of his earliest poems. It's in The Less Deceived. It's written in April 1954, and the sharp eye of you who might have noticed the slide came up a little bit earlier. It's called Churchgoing.
Once I'm sure there's nothing going on, I step inside, letting the door thud shut. Another church, matting, seats and stone, and little books, sprawlings of flowers, cut for Sunday, brownish now. Some brass and stuff up at the holy end. The small, neat organ, and a tense, musty, unignorable silence. Brewed God knows how long. Hatless, I take off my cycle clips in awkward reverence, move forward, run my hand around the font. From where I stand, the roof looks almost new. Cleaned or restored? Someone would know. I don't. Mounting the lectern, I peruse a few hectoring large-scale verses and pronounce "Here endeth" much more loudly than I'd meant. The echoes snigger briefly. Back at the door, I sign the book, donate an Irish sixpence, reflect the place was not worth stopping for. Yet stop, I did. In fact, I often do. And always end much at a loss like this, wondering what to look for, Wondering too, when churches fall completely out of use, what we shall turn them into, if we shall keep a few cathedrals chronically on show, their parchment plate and picks in locked cases, and let the rest rent-free to rain and sheep. Shall we avoid them as unlucky places? Or, after dark, will dubious women come to make their children touch a particular stone, pick simples for a cancer, or on some advised night see walking a dead one? Power of some sort or other will go on in games, in riddles, seemingly at random. But superstition, like belief, must die. And what remains when disbelief has gone? Grass, weedy pavement, brambles, buttress, sky. A shape less recognizable each week, a purpose more obscure. I wonder who will be the last, the very last, to seek this place for what it was. One of the crew that tap and jot and know what rude lofts were. Some ruin bibber randy for antique, or Christmas addict counting on a whiff of gown and bands and organ pipes and myrrh. Or will he be my representative? Awed, uninformed, knowing the ghostly silt dispersed, yet tending to this cross of ground through suburb scrub, because it held unspilt so long, and equably what since is found only in separation. Marriage, birth, and death, and thoughts of these, for which was built this special shell. For though I've no idea what this accoutred frowsty pile is worth, it pleases me to stand in silence here. A serious house on serious earth it is, in whose blent air all our compulsions meet, are recognized and robed as destinies. And that much never can be obsolete, since someone will forever be surprising a hunger in himself to be more serious, and gravitating with it to this ground which he once heard was proper to grow wise in, if only that so many dead lie round.
Larkin wasn't especially churchy, whatever that means, but he was a product of his time, and in that time, Anglicanism, the Church of England, provided a social and architectural fabric to British society, so it's natural for him to gravitate towards such institutions. But not only that, his poem speaks probably to many of us today who can't resist entering a church while perhaps visiting an English village. Whether we believe or not is irrelevant. Churches do connect us with our history and our past. Interestingly, Larkin became friendly with this man. Which, when we were researching for this evening, was one of the most surprising things that came out. Many of you will recognise Kenneth Williams for the Carry On films, and he was a general wit on television an awful lot, and chat shows in the 1960s and 70s. I'm not sure it's documented how their friendship began, but it became a friendship through lots of letters. Many of those letters, Larkin talked about religion. Kenneth Williams was actually quite a devout Anglican originally, despite the contradictions perhaps in his own lifestyle and the then Church of England, which was a very conservative body in the 1960s. And as Larkin and Kenneth Williams' friendship progressed, Kenneth Williams ended up abandoning his own Christianity. It had been a significant part of his life. What Larkin did take seriously, though, was his work. He became librarian at the University of Hull in 1955 and stayed there until his death in 1985. I was a student there. Larkin was a remote figure. His reputation was huge, but his interaction with undergraduates minimal. He would emerge from the library every weekday prompt at 1 p.m, make his way over to the staff bar across the lawn, and return to the library a lot more unsteadily around 2:15 p.m. The only words he ever exchanged with me in my 4 years there were, "Can't you read the signs?" as he saw me take the short cut across the lawn in defiance of the keep off the grass notice. Larkin wrote about work, its pleasures and its problems in his poem Toads and Toads Revisited. Daniel will now read Toads Revisited.
Walking around in the park should feel better than work. The lake, the sunshine, the grass to lie on, blurred playground noises beyond black-stockinged nurses. Not a bad place to be. Yet it doesn't suit me. Being one of the men you meet of an afternoon, palsied old step-takers, hair-eyed clerks with the jitters, waxed-fleshed outpatients still vague from accidents, and characters in long coats deep in the litter baskets, all dodging the toad work by being stupid or weak. Think of being them, hearing the hours chime, watching the bread delivered, the sun by clouds covered, the children going home. Think of being them, turning over their failures by some bed of lobelias, nowhere to go but indoors, nor friends but empty chairs. No. Give me my entry, my loaf-haired secretary, my shall I keep the call in, sir? What else can I answer when the lights come on at 4 at the end of another year? Give me your arm, old toad. Help me down Cemetery Road.
I was asked to identify that quotation once in a quiz.
All right, well done.
Help me down Cemetery Road. Anyways, of course.
Larkin actually became very associated with that animal through those two poems, as you'll know. And when I returned to Hull in 2010, the city had created the Larkin Toad Trail, which proved to be quite an idiosyncratic tourist hit. One that never even thought about it. In the poem that Daniel's just read, we heard the line, "Give me my in tray, my loaf-haired secretary," and that takes us neatly to Larkin's love life. As I said earlier, as an undergraduate there, Larkin seemed to be, and to most people, I'm sure, a dusty bachelor figure. Only after his death did it become apparent that the truth was he was in love, and loved by several women at the same time. Betty Mackworth, who died last year at the age of 101, was not only his loaf-haired secretary, she was also his lover. But so too was Maeve Brennan, and so too was his longtime companion, Monica Jones. This is the promotional shot for the BBC drama Love Again, and we use this shot for the Century Club promotional this evening as well. That's Hugh Bonville there in the bald wig and the glasses, and fresh from Downton Abbey and the Paddington films. He looks very different there, but he played Larkin very well, and those are the three women that were in Larkin's life for a long time. Monica, most of all, who came to live with him towards the end of his life when he moved to Newland Park. There's a copy of this film, by the way, on YouTube at the moment if you want to watch it. Larkin couldn't commit to any of these women individually, but Maeve Brennan, who worked with him at the library for those 30 years, gave him the inspiration for his next poem. He was at home in Pearson Park in Hull. Maeve was at a concert in Hull's City Hall. The programme was being broadcast on BBC Radio in 1961. I think it would have been the light programme or the third programme in these days. I'm not quite sure when the third programme on the BBC started. Anyway, Larkin was listening at his house to the BBC Symphony Orchestra as he imagined Maeve in the audience. This next poem is called Broadcast.
Giant whispering and coughing from vast, Sunday full and organ frowned on spaces proceed a sudden spattle on the drum, the Queen, and huge resettling. Then begins a snivelling of the violins. I think of your face among all those faces, beautiful and devout before cascades of monumental slithering. One of your gloves unnoticed on the floor beside those new, slightly outmoded shoes. Here it goes quickly dark. I lose all but the outline of the still and withering leaves on half-empty trees. Behind the glowing wave bands, ray-beat storms of cordine, by being distant, overpower my mind all the more shamelessly. Their cut-off shout, leaving me desperate to pick out your hands, tiny in all that air, appalling.
Larkin's focus on those tiny hands at the end of the poem makes for a restrained but still undeniably beautiful love poem. Let's hear now the title poem from his most praised collection, The Whitsun Weddings, and that train journey he made in 1958. A friend of ours pointed out that Sunday just gone was Whitsun Sunday. Interestingly, Larkin's journey wasn't done on the Whitsun, that came afterwards. Whether he chose to call it Whitsun Weddings for the alliteration, we're not sure, but he actually made the journey from Hull down to Queen's Cross in June of 1958. Anyway, it could have been such an inconsequential experience. In Larkin's hands, this poem becomes a masterpiece. It's called The Whitsun Weddings.
That Whitsun, I was late getting away. Not till about 1:20 on the sunlit Saturday did my 3/4 empty train pull out. All windows down, all cushions hot, all sense of being in a hurry gone. We ran behind the backs of houses, crossed a street of blinding windscreens, smelt the fish dock. Thence the river's level drifting breath began, where sky and Lincolnshire and water meet. All afternoon through the tall heat that slept for miles inland, a slow and stopping curve southwards we kept. Wide farms went by, short-shadowed cattle, and canals with floatings of industrial froth. A hothouse flashed uniquely. Hedges dipped and rose, and now and then a smell of grass displaced the reek of buttoned carriage cloth until the next town, new and nondescript, approached with acres of dismantled cars. At first, I didn't notice what a noise the weddings made each station that we stopped at. Some destroys the interest of what's happening in the shade. And down the long, cool platforms, whoops and skirls, I took for porters larking with the males, and went on, reading. Once we started, though, we passed them, grinning and pomaded girls in parodies of fashion, heels and veils, all posed irresolutely, watching us go, as if out on the end of an event, waving goodbye to something that survived it. Struck, I leant more promptly out next time, more curiously, and saw it all again in different terms. The fathers with broad belts under their suits and seamy foreheads, mothers loud and fat, and uncles shouting smut, and then the perms, the nylon gloves and jewellery substitutes, the lemons, mauves, olive ochres that marked off the girls unreally from the rest. Yes, from cafes and banquet halls up yards and bunting-dressed coach party annexes, the wedding days were coming to an end. All down the line, fresh couples climbed aboard. The rest stood round, the last confetti and advice were thrown, and as we moved, each face seemed to define just what it saw departing. Children frowned at something dull. Fathers had never known success so huge and wholly farcical. The women shared the secret like a happy funeral, while girls, gripping their handbags tighter, stared at a religious wounding. Free at last and loaded with the sum of all they saw, we hurried towards London, shuffling gouts of steam. Now fields were building plots and poplars cast long shadows over major roads. For some 50 minutes, that in time would seem just long enough to settle hats and say, I nearly died. A dozen marriages got underway. They watched the landscape sitting side by side. An Odeon went past, a cooling tower, and someone running up to bowl. A nun thought of the others they would never meet, or how their lives would all contain this hour. I thought of London spread out in the sun, its postal districts packed like squares of wheat. There we were aimed. And as we raced across bright knots of rail, past standing Pullmans, walls of blackened moss came close. And it was nearly done, this frail, travelling coincidence. And what it held stood ready to be loosed with all the power that being changed can give. We slowed again, and as the tightened brakes took hold, there swelled a sense of falling, like an arrow shower sent out of sight, somewhere becoming rain.
So that was June 1958 as Larkin travelled to London. He said, every time you stopped, fresh emotion climbed aboard. And finally, between Peterborough and London, when you hurtled on, you felt the whole thing was being aimed like a bullet, to the heart of things. You know, all this fresh, open life. It was an incredible experience. I've never forgotten it. If you can escape the Harry Potter connections at King's Cross, you can see the plaque in the wall with the final lines of Whitsun Wedding memorialised there. The Times Literary Supplement described this as one of the great poems of our age. For me, personally, the real beauty of that poem is in the phrase, this frail, travelling coincidence. And I guess that can be writ large to all of us in this room now, in May 26. Because Larkin was a lone traveller on that train, as he was through much of his life, it enabled him to have this strong, singular perspective on what he witnessed. Yes, he had his work, and he had his mother, and we'll talk about his mother a bit later, and he had his love affairs, but essentially he needed to be alone. It was when he ceased to be alone, and when Monica moved with him, that effectively his creativity dried up. The algorithms of Google will tell you that his most famous poem is This Be the Verse. This fame doesn't come just because of the notoriety of its opening line, but also I think because it's brief, direct, with an obvious rhyming scheme, and it scans so well. This is Daniel with This Be the Verse.
They fuck you up, your mum and dad. They may not mean to, but they do. They fill you with the thoughts they had and add some extra, just for you. But they were fucked up in their turn by fools in old-style hats and coats, who half the time were soppy stern and half at one another's throats. Man hands on misery to man. It deepens like a coastal shelf. Get out as early as you can, and don't have any kids yourself.
And Larkin knew exactly what he was doing with that poem. He knew it would grab attention and gain its own notoriety. I think he wrote in a letter to Kingsley Amis that he reckoned before he died it would be recited by 1 million girl guides at some official occasion. That never came to pass, but it was given out in schools. Although interesting, Larkin has been withdrawn from many school syllabuses these days. Anyway, this evening is in 2 parts. I should have said this at the very beginning. We're going to finish the first part of this evening with a song from Linda Moylan and her friends Rebecca Mileham and Ian Montague, who throughout their career have been influenced by and inspired by Philip Larkin. So Linda, Rebecca and Ian.
To continue the theme of being fucked up by one's parents, and this song is about my beloved father.
Records we used to play.
Linda, Rebecca and Ian, and Linda's, this is an album, isn't it, Linda, that's out at the moment?
It is out everywhere.
It's out everywhere, so it is available.
All the places.
All the best places. We've got a short break, about 15-20 minutes now. We'll have the second part with me and Daniel after the break, and after that Raphael will take some questions. And I just must add one more thing. I did promise on the Century Club literature in advance of this evening, if anyone can tell me what the connection between Eileen Atkins and Philip Larkin is, I'll buy them a drink. So if anyone wants to come up to me and tell me what that connection is, I promise to honour that.
Connection with what and Philip Larkin?
Say again?
Connection with what?
Eileen Atkins and Philip Larkin.
She played his mother in the television play.
She did that.
And she looks remarkably like her too.
Slowly, ponderously, almost around the library over to Staff House. Just talking in the break room, there's quite a few people here from Hull who will recognise this description of him. By contrast, when I was at Hull in 1976, a new lecturer arrived in the English department. He cultivated a debonair, almost dandyish image and wore what his gushing female students called a Keats coat. He cultivated a friendship with Larkin and eventually became his biographer. And finally, he became Poet Laureate himself, the very office and pinnacle that Larkin never accepted. His name was Sir Andrew Motion, or just Andrew Motion in those days. His Keats coat was a performance, but so too, of course, was Larkin's rather different persona. Clive James, the writer and TV personality, says because Larkin's life seemed so humdrum, that's why he speaks so relevantly to us. The chances are, he says, most poetry readers aren't sprinting into battle. More likely, they're hovering in the supermarket aisles, fretting about the rising price of Marmite. And Larkin encouraged this dusty, bachelor-like image, and he did it especially well in Annus Mirabilis.
Sexual intercourse began in 1963, which was rather late for me, between the end of the Chatterley ban and the Beatles' first LP. Up to then, there'd only been a sort of bargaining, a wrangle for the ring, a shame that started at 16 and spread to everything. Then all at once, the quarrel sank. Everyone felt the same, and life became a brilliant breaking of the bank, a quite unlosable game. So life was never better than in 1963, though just too late for me, between the end of the Chatterley ban and the Beatles' first LP.
I want to quote Clive James once more this evening, because he's a fine writer. He's a good journalist. He was in the Observer, wrote the TV column there for many years, and he says this. And this is talking about Larkin being dull, being grey. He says, all we need to remember when it comes to the appreciation of his mental discipline is that his creative solitude was achieved in company, with no duty shirked. Though it's hard to imagine him looking forward to a meeting of the Bryn Mawr Jones Library Car Park Space Allocation Committee, or whatever grim task loomed next, it is equally impossible to imagine him ducking out of it. Bohemia is a refuge, and he never stepped towards it, not even once. The everyday might have been full of things that he found dull, but the everyday was his subject. And we need to be very confident about our own lives before we find his unexciting. I think that's very fair. But Larkin is criticised worse than being dull. He is criticised, he's judged by some for views that these days would be regarded as unacceptable when it comes to race. Raphael was at a book fair in London last month and told several people he was holding this Philip Larkin evening. The response tended to come back, wonderful poet, but wasn't he a racist? Of course, if Anthony Thwaite had not published Larkin's letters to Kingsley Amis in 1992, this aspect probably would not have emerged. The letters were private. They were intended to remain private. Larkin tailored those letters to his correspondent Kingsley Amis with that undergraduate raillery which reads like a form of schoolboy obscenity, and it was carried on in adulthood to sustain the language of their Oxford camaraderie. It's utterly unacceptable in a public forum. And Simon Armitage adds this: to be an apologist for Larkin in terms of his language and his attitude and his views would be to try to defend the indefensible. But if we can separate the person from the poems, I think we can hold them up as something to celebrate and admire. The letters are ugly, the poems are not, the poems are beautiful. Let's try to separate the art from the artist. Now, some of you may know Joel Taylor here. Joel Taylor is the winner of the T.S. Eliot Poetry Prize a couple of years ago. She describes herself as a queer poet, a working class poet, an anti-racism campaigner, and she discusses Larkin's work with Simon Armitage in the Larkin Revisited on the BBC Sounds platform. What Joel Taylor and Larkin concluded was that Larkin was a product of his time, and Britain, before the 1960s, was in some respects an uglier and more intolerant country, not necessarily born from ideology, but born out of ignorance. We're all fashioned to some extent by our society. And it's interesting to reflect that Larkin was born in the same year as Jack Kerouac in the USA, and the American experience was so different in creating the Kerouac that we idolise today, perhaps. But let's move on for now. There was one notable black American aspect of Larkin's life, the black America that had produced jazz. Larkin adored jazz. He wrote in 1965, I can live a week without poetry, but not a day without jazz. He wrote a weekly column for the Daily Telegraph on jazz and penned this next poem to his idol, Sidney Boucher. It's called For Sidney Boucher.
That note you hold, narrowing and rising, shakes like New Orleans reflected on the water, and in all ears appropriate falsehood wakes, building for summer legendary quarter of balconies, flower baskets, and quadrilles, everyone making love and going shares. Oh, play that thing, mute. Glorious story reveals others may license, grouping around their chairs, sporting house girls like circus tigers, priced far above rubies, to pretend they're fads, while scholars Moncay nod around unnoticed, wrapped up in personnels like old plaids. On me, your voice falls, as they say love should, like an enormous yes. My crescent city is where your speech alone is understood and greeted as the natural noise of good, scattering long-haired grief and scored pity.
It's interesting, just talking in the break we had a few minutes ago, there's a few people here from Hull this evening, and at least one who worked in the library as well. And I think we would all agree about this, that Larkin seemed a remote figure, always in his dark suit and dark tie, It was though the spirit of the 1960s, that revolutionary decade, never quite reached that part of East Yorkshire, or Humberside as it became rechristened. And Larkin himself relished, I think, that conservative appearance and outlook. He enjoyed the distance it gave him. His office, high up in the library, overlooked what we call the Great White Way, which is the pedestrian route between the Student Union and the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. And I used to imagine him looking out at the walkway with us long-haired, noisy students going past, with a mixture of dismay and perhaps envy, when I read the title poem of his last collection, High Windows.
When I see a couple of kids and guess he's fucking her and she's taking pills or wearing a diaphragm, I know this is paradise. Everyone old has dreamed of all their lives. Bonds and gestures pushed to one side like an outdated combine harvester, and everyone young going down the long slide to happiness, endlessly. I wonder if anyone looked at me 50 years back and thought, that'll be the life. No God anymore, or sweating in the dark about hell and that, or having to hide what you think of the priest. He and his lot will all go down the long slide like 3 bloody birds. And immediately, rather than words, comes the thought of high windows, the sun comprehending glass, and beyond it, the deep blue air that shows nothing and is nowhere and is endless.
I quite appreciate that Hull probably seems very far from metropolitan London, but if you get the chance to go back there, I think I'm right in saying that the library or the Philip Larkin office is available for tourist trips, and if you go in the library, if you go into his office, you can find different versions of this poem. It's quite a complex poem. I think Philip Larkin assumed, or rather Philip Larkin was proud of it, because that's why he gave the title for his last collection. And originally, when he talked about the sun comprehending glass, he talked about the sun sanctifying glass, which I think helps perhaps our understanding of what is a complex poem. It's certainly talking about a man shut out from youth, from society as he sees it, but Clive James in his book says he thinks it's a poem not of desolation but of richness and hope, and perhaps pointing to an afterlife perhaps like Thomas Hardy, that Larkin didn't believe in for himself, but he knew it existed for others. So the priest might come running to Larkin, but that priest in Larkin's day would surely find a barrier waiting. And this takes us to his next, and one of his shortest poems, and most quoted. It's called Days.
What are days for? Days are where we live. They come, they wake us, time and time over. They are to be happy in. Where can we live but days? Solving that question brings the priest and the doctor in their long coats, running over the fields.
The clarity of language in Days doesn't diminish the complexity of the idea, but it enhances their impact. And that's the strength of Larkin. He's often associated with the Movement, a group of mid-20th century British poets who rejected the complexity and obscurity of modernism in favour of clarity, restraint and accessibility. Unlike earlier poets who sought to construct big narratives or symbolic systems, Larkin focuses on the immediate and the particular, train journeys, church visits, aging bodies, everyday relationships. Yet through these seemingly modest materials, he addresses some of the most profound questions of human existence. I mentioned his mother earlier. This is Ainhoa Larkin. This is a photograph from their family album. On the back of this photograph, Larkin had written, "Happy as the day is long." I'm not sure when that picture was taken. Ainhoa was a presence through most of his life. She died in 1977. Larkin died only a few years later. She lived into her 90s. He had a very close relationship with her, but close doesn't necessarily mean warm. He visited her every fortnight in Leicestershire. He wrote to her sometimes as much as twice a week, but she was a nervous, anxious woman who seems never to have escaped the effects of her domineering husband, who died just after World War II. She had little to occupy her other than the most humdrum of details. She had few inner resources or outside distractions, except for a scattering of domestic chores. She visited her daughter. She occasionally visited Philip. She took some pleasure in his achievements. There's no doubt that her caution and guardedness, almost fear of the modern world, entered his soul. Ainhoa Larkin was someone who was old all of her life. Nevertheless, even the elderly, as Larkin knew well, had enjoyed a youth. She inspired one of his most moving and beautiful poems, Love Songs in Age. And listen, please, to the last 9 words of this fairly short poem, where the single syllables cut down the promise of love, like a scythe of corn. So, Love Songs in Age.
She kept her songs. They kept so little space. The covers pleased her. One bleached from lying in a sunny place. One marked in circles by a vase of water. One mended when a tidy fit had seized her, and coloured by her daughter. So they had waited, till in widowhood she found them, looking for something else, and stood relearning how each frank submissive chord had ushered in word after sprawling hyphenated word, and the unfailing sense of being young spread out like a spring-woken tree, wherein that hidden freshness sung, that certainty of time laid up in store as when she played them first. But even more, the glare of that much-mentioned brilliance, love, broke out, to show its bright incipience sailing above, still promising to solve and satisfy and set unchangeably in order. So, to pile them back, to cry, was hard, without lamely admitting how it had not done so then, and could not now.
Daniel particularly asked that we performed, or we included that poem this evening, and it's beautiful, but it's terribly sad, and that it had not done so then and could not now really cuts at the end. What a demolition of the false hopes of love. That poem, incidentally, was read at Larkin's own memorial service a few weeks after his death. Although Eva exasperated him, and he found himself frequently gently chiding her in his letters, he was influenced by her and perhaps listened to her advice. She counselled him against marriage. She warned, marriage would be no certain guarantee as to socks being mended, or meals ready when they are wanted. Neither would it be wise to marry just for those comforts. It is marriage that kills the heart and keeps it dead.
Wow.
Better starve the heart than overfeed it. As we near the end of our reading this evening, it's worth reflecting on why Larkin remains so popular. Well, for one thing, he's so quotable. Some of his phrases, and we've heard many of them this evening, enter your consciousness and are not easily forgotten. Martin Amis, the son of Larkin's friend Kingsley Amis, said this: Larkin's originality is palpable. Many poets make us smile. Many make us laugh, or in that curious phrase, laugh out loud, as if there's any other way of laughing. Larkin remains the most quoted, the best-selling, and the most beloved of English poets. His poems, scrupulous, precise, and ascendingly lovely, are true and wise. They speak to us of the big things, of birth, marriage, and above all, death. The writer Blake Morrison supports Amos's view. You think as late 20th century poets go, he's one of the best. And then you think, no. As 20th century British poets go, he is the best. The problem for me now is getting him out of my head. One of his most quotable poems and quotable first sentences is contained in The Trees.
The trees are coming into leaf, like something almost being said. The recent buds relax and spread. Their greenness is a kind of grief. Is it that they are born again and we grow old? No, they die too. Their yearly trick of looking new is written down in rings of grain. Yet still the unresting castles thresh in full-grown thickness every May. Last year is dead, they seem to say. Begin afresh, afresh, afresh.
Like something almost being said. That's beautiful, isn't it? Larkin wrote very few nature or pastoral poems. When he does so, it's without the reverence or optimism associated with earlier poetic traditions. In The Trees, this annual renewal of leaves might suggest hope or certainty, but Larkin complicates this interpretation. The trees appear to begin afresh, yet this renewal is mechanical rather than meaningful. And the very buds that suggest renewal are in their own way green tears. Ooh. It's this perfect partnership of hope and uncertainty that makes Larkin such a master. As I say, we want to leave time for some questions, but before we come to our last poem of the evening, Linda, Rebecca, and Ian have their second song, and Linda, I'll leave you to introduce this one.
I'm using the technical sticky tape to attach this particular song because it's been such a long time since we've performed it. It's called Two Hands, and Ian and I wrote it together, and I found a lot of solace in churches at certain points in my life, and we do, especially when there is no one else in there. So this song is called Two Hands. I used to search for churches in between the madness to try to find a God with my face, a pagan or a Christian, a lover or a brother, to take me down again, and again. I need something more than my two hands. I need something more, to look for something greater beyond myself. I wonder, to feel again the whispers of the rain, a bittersweet surrender, humiliate me slowly, open me unholy again and again. I need something more than my two hands. I need something more. The woman that weaves silver and gold, forged in a fire you can't control. We don't I need something more than my two hands. I need something more. I need something more than my two hands. I need something more. The woman that weaves silver and gold, she is forged in a fire you can't control. We don't go. The woman that weaves silver and gold, forged in a fire you can't control. We don't go.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you. And Linda was referring to the church in that, and when Raphael and I were discussing what should be the final poem tonight, we had little doubt we'd end with this next one, a poem about love or promise of love, but also a poem about ambiguity. Larkin's treatment of love is complex and often contradictory. In An Arundel 2, he appears to affirm the enduring power of love. Yet the poem really acknowledges that this interpretation may be a projection of what we want. He's looking at a tomb, a memorial, St Chichester Cathedral, and it's called an Arundel tomb because that's where the Earl and the Countess of Arundel found their resting place. And certainly if you go there, the poem is displayed just to the side of this tomb, and has become quite a popular tourist draw in itself. The joined hands of the two effigies have become a symbol not of historical reality but of modern desire. It's believed they were added much later than the original sculpture. It's the final poem in his 1964 collection, The Wits and Bones. This is an Arundel tomb.
Side by side, their faces blurred, the Earl and Countess lie in stone, their proper habits vaguely shown as jointed armour, stiffened pleat, and that faint hint of the absurd, the little dogs under their feet. Such plainness of the pre-Baroque hardly involves the eye, until it meets his left-hand gauntlet, still clasped empty in the other, and one sees with a sharp, tender shock his hand withdrawn, holding her hand. They would not think to lie so long. Such faithfulness in effigy was just a detail friends would see, a sculpture's sweet commissioned grace, thrown off in helping to prolong the Latin names around the base. They would not guess how early in their supine stationary voyage the air would change to soundless damage, turn the old tenantry away. How soon succeeding eyes begin to look, not read. Rigidly they persisted, linked through lengths and breadths of time. Snow fell, undated. Light each summer thronged the glass. A bright litter of bird calls strewed the same bone-riddled ground. And up the paths the endless altered people came, washing at their identity. Now, helpless in the hollow of an unarmorial age, a trough of smoke in slow suspended skeins above their scrap of history. Only an attitude remains. Time has transfigured them into untruth. The stone fidelity they hardly meant has come to be their final blazon, and to prove our almost instinct, almost true. What will survive of us is love.
Daniel, thank you very much. I don't think we could have a better person to play Philip Larkin for us this evening, so thank you very much. And I know this evening has raised some questions about Philip Larkin and his life. I'm here to deal with some of those questions is my Goat Star Books colleague, Raphael Cruz.
Well, thank you very much. I'm Mr. Goat Star Books, and I have a degree in English literature, although I'm Spanish, but I've lived here for donkey's years. I'm married to an Englishman, so I'll do my best to explain the most English poet to the English, which is very daring. But sometimes it's better to see it from outside. So I'm ready for your questions, and I'll try to answer them. But I think more importantly, I would like, I was a teacher for the rest of my life, I would like other people to answer as well and not me, the expert, okay? So if somebody wants to ask a question, ask it please. And if somebody wants to answer that question, answer it please, okay? I am a conductor, an expert, okay? So, any questions on the floor? I can see anything. Oh yes, yeah, okay. My knee.
Hi. Raphael, your friend,
Speak close to the microphone.
your colleague, Peter?
Kevin.
Kevin said a few weeks ago you met someone at a book fair talking about Larkin and the person who more or less made a allegation against Larkin for his racism.
Yeah.
If that person were me, I would be very happy that I managed to stir things up. And I'm so proud. Yeah, if that person was me, because I'm more or less I was quite familiar with all those people you mentioned, Anthony Sweet, Andrew Motion, yeah. But anyway, my question is whether that person was me or not.
No, it wasn't. If you were there, but it was a young person. I don't think that person our age is so categorical about racism. I think luckily the world has moved on, thanks to a lot of things. The Beatles and the Chatterley's Lover and all that. The world has changed for the better, and we are having a backlash now, which is normal in history. There's always a reaction to when things go. And that lady is a young poet, and she said I was saying he's not a racist. He was just a private letter. No dogs, no Irish, no blacks. The 1950s was a very, very, very racist place everywhere. No, I mean, probably even the blacks were racist on the blacks. You see what I mean? Racism is everywhere. It's horrible, and we all have it. The Arabs against the other Arabs. The Shiites against the. So it's a horrible thing, and it's terrible, but we all have it, and that's what I was saying. She was having none of it. She said, no, he was a racist. I said, well, we are all racist, and we are moving, and we are changing, and that was that. It was that young boy, not you. I think you wouldn't have said so categorically that. No?
But I don't think that Larkin need any defense at all.
Well, if he's attacked, if we attack, we all need a defense, and he's attacked. But there's a question here. Theo, no?
Yeah. Thank you, Rafa. Yes, racism, but there was the poem about Cindy Bechet, of course. Kevin, you referred to Martin Amis and his reflections and his book, indeed, about Philip Larkin, which is a wonderful collection of poems selected by Martin Amis. He describes Larkin as a novelist poet rather than a poet's poet. So my question to Rafa is, what do you understand by that distinction? The other thing just wanted to mention was Larkin's almost obsession with death. You did touch on it, Kevin, but so many of his poems, Going, Next Please, Our Bad, The Old Fools, are obsessed with death. And that's another feature of the man, and I wonder where that came from.
Well, if anybody wants to say something about that, as I said, you're welcome. You want to say something? That's great.
I mean, I think it's possible that Larkin and Kingsley Amis exchanged places from what they started out as, because Larkin published Girl in Winter and Jill as novels before possibly making much of a name as a poet, and Kingsley was of course associated with the movement and was in the New Poetry in 1962, but obviously became much better known as a novelist with Lucky Jim and subsequently. And so I wonder if he's a novelist poet, because he thought he was a novelist to begin with, and Kingsley, who perhaps thought he was a poet, they flip-flopped, can we call it? Yeah, I mean there was a third Larkin novel, I think, was it called A New World Record or something, which I think is only available in sort of note form. It never got completed, but I mean the other thing, of course, it's sorry to take up all your time.
It's your time, not my time.
I mean, one point I was thinking of making before was how Larkin supposedly was miserable, curmudgeonly, misanthropic, isn't he? And yet a lot of the poems we've heard tonight were quite positive. And it's like the Arundel Tomb that we talked about before, although everybody quotes what will survive of his love, actually all the rest of the poem building up to that has completely undermined that statement, and he gets quoted as being cheerful when in fact he was completely undermining that cheerfulness, whereas mainly I think he's considered to be miserable when in fact a lot of positive things have come out of what we had tonight.
Thank you. Before I pass the microphone to anybody that wants to say something on that, it's been fascinating for me. I studied Larkin at the university in Barcelona in the 80s. I'm an old man, my knee. I had to revisit Larkin preparing this show and read everything, his biography and all that. And it's a new life. I studied Larkin as an English, quintessentially English poet, very English. Never traveled abroad, so kind of like the Daily Mail of poets, if you like, you know. But I always suspected it was a mask persona, you know, just like somebody, a persona of a super liberal, super happy club, you know. That's all like roles we play, you know. And I always thought he was playing a role. I think that he is a post-war poet, and we've got post-war poets like that everywhere in Europe, everywhere in the world. I suppose I talk Europe because I studied European literature, in which I include American and South America because it's kind of an extension. But we've got that kind of poet in modern India, in Japan, and the crisis of what happens after the atomic bomb, and what happens after communism that triumphed in the Soviet Union and everywhere, and also in our Britain, you know. Basically, we had reached paradise. The state was taking us from the cradle to the grave, and he's a poet of the ordinary. After the upheavals and the drama of the 20s and the 30s, everybody, and sadly we seem to be going back to that kind of excitement. We're all very excited about, you know, oh, we got the truth, oh, we have to fight for what we believe. No, says Larkin, don't fight for anything. Just think. Just think of the beauty of the ordinary. Just think of how complex and deep it is, that Arundel Tomb. Because I think at the end of that poem, what we have is not a denial of love, it's not a mocking. There's always compassion in Larkin. There's always, and that's what we love him, I think. The love is maybe fake, the love of those two, you know. It was, we know that the hand was added in the 19th century, so it is definitely fake. But what a beautiful thing to do. I mean, whoever did that, the Victorian, you know, I know that I love Victorian sculptures, but this is a master, anonymous, I don't remember the name. It is known, amazing, you know, to You're renewing the church, and I'm going to have these people hold hands after love, What a beautiful thing, and what a beautiful thing to pick up in a poem, even if you doubt. We have to believe that love is what keeps us together, because otherwise what we have is the bomb and the comes and Dachau and all that, or whatever is happening everywhere in the world. Anyway, that's me done. Anybody wants to say?
I haven't got a question, but I'd like to come back to the poems themselves. The ending of the Woods and Weddings speaks of the newly married couples as an arrow shower sent out of sight, somewhere becoming rain. And that is Larkin is talking about the newly married couples setting out on life, what their life would become. And there's a corresponding image in another poem called Home is So Sad, which is when both of the partners have died and the home is left. And the home is seen as, a marital home is seen as a joyous shot at how things ought to be, long fallen wide. And so it's the hope with which the Woods and Weddings expresses the hope. The Home is So Sad expresses the reality in many cases. It didn't work out. And also, if I may, we had love songs in Age. We talked about the closeness of Larkin with his mother. And there's another poem which Larkin never actually published in his lifetime, a very short poem, which also expresses that. I'd just like to quickly present it. It's called Mother, Summer, I. My mother, who hates thunderstorms, holds up each summer day and shakes it out suspiciously. There's swarms of great dark clouds are lurking there. But when the August weather breaks, rains begin, and little frost sharpens the bird abandoned there, her worried summer look is lost. And I, her son, though summer born, summer loving, nonetheless and easier when the leaves are gone. Too often, summer days appear emblems of perfect happiness I can't confront. I must await a time less bold, less rich, less clear, and autumn more appropriate.
Well, that was very beautiful, and thanks for doing the job for us. But that's not your role. Your role is to explain to us why do you like that poem so much? What the poem says to you. Why did you have the urge to read us that poem?
Because I think it expresses Larkin's suspicion of the idea of perfect happiness, the idea that you can be perfectly happy. It's for him, that is not an aspiration that he can adopt. He feels that it's got his life is going to be rather less than perfect happiness. It's an autumn.
That's great. That's great, because we talk a lot about Mr. Miserable, the cantankerous man, but he's always remembered with love by everybody. Even the long-suffering ladies in attendance that he had, the three of them, they couldn't fault him. Nobody, because they understood that he was trying to be himself. And love is about letting somebody be himself. And they were all trying to be themselves. They were all discovered. This is 1950s Britain. This is before the Beatles' first LP. This is before the liberation. And liberation led to terrible places. Lots of women are now revisiting the 60s. And it was all right for the men, but not for us. And they were all exploring a new relation between men and women. I don't think he was sad. It was just what is sad is the human condition. Again, the post-war was, can you imagine? I mean, barely imagine. I mean, I was born in 1964 myself. I consider myself an old man, but it's unimaginable, the cruelty, the horror of, dropping a bomb in Hiroshima. So they all try to be good, like kids that throw, a ball into a glass window, and then suddenly they are there thinking, what have we done? They were trying their best, everybody. They were trying to make a better society, and I think Larkin is part of that movement. That's what the movement. He's always the movement. It was something very loose and not quite defined, but some journalists or other talk about the movement, poetry and writing movement of literature in the 1950s, post-war, that did away with the experimental and uncomprehending avant-garde of the 30s, and was trying to understand and use the language of the common man to see the poetry and the complicated philosophies presented in our daily lives every day. And I think he gloried in this job as a librarian and dealing with his mother, even though the relation was complicated. There is, it's not a poet of misery, I think. I don't know what you think. It's a poet of bittersweet, because life is bittersweet. Anyway, any questions?
How many poems did Larkin write in total, and do you think his kind of bittersweetness of life was what sort of drove him on, and if he had had a very happy life, as you said, he may have lost his creativity?
I think it's difficult to have how many words?
How many poems?
Poems. Not many, as Kevin said, not 3 very thin books.
Well, yes, sorry, if I could just come on that. In his published collections in his lifetime, the 3 books plus the North Ship, relatively few. But when Anthony Thwaite put everything together and put in those poems that Larkin hadn't want published, it turns out there was quite a lot. There were some good ones, like Mother, Summer, I, but there's some in there that you really feel would be better left unpublished. And I know there are people here from the Philip Larkin Society this evening who might take issue with that, but I think the overall effect of the collected poems was to dilute his output, and would have been better not seen.
Well, a poet is a master of his work. When he dies, he stops being so, like we all do. He was a master. He produced 3 books. That's what he wanted. And then we discovered that there were lots of other work that he didn't publish. Up to us what we do or don't with that, but we must always bear in mind that he didn't want that published. He didn't say specifically that he didn't destroy it, and he had the option in those days. Now we don't destroy anything in a hard drive, but in those days he could just burn it. So in a way it's fair game, he could have destroyed it or not. So if he didn't, it's for us to do whatever we want, and they've published it. Now, I think there's always, your question is about the happiness. I think there's always one happy, one unhappy thing. I think he is the master of the joy of the ordinary, and there's no joy in the ordinary that is not dull and boring. So, he liked going to the pub with his mates, and he liked talking to his mother, but he couldn't specifically find anything in that particularly enlightening. And therefore he wrote the poems questioning that question, that doubting of, what are we doing? So this is what I mean by the poet of socialists. What do we do when everything is sorted, when we don't, when suffering other than illness, and even illness is, science was working for. So he's a very good poet of that situation, that specific situation that brought us as a human race forward, which is after the war and all that, where do we go? And we go to happiness. But is happiness happy? It's bittersweet, I mean, happiness is marriage. Marriage is very important. And death it comes to all of us. and death is there, and death is sad, is the ultimate sadness, you know. So it's all very bittersweet. But I think he was a poet of finding, for example, Wilson Weddings, you know, that journey. I think in that journey we can see that on the one hand he seems to be mocking, now what are these people trying to do with these weddings, you know, dressing up and going to London for their honeymoons or whatever they think they're doing, if we are all gonna die. But the description of it all and the way he puts it, and that's why he's a poet, is beautiful and full of love for these people. He's enjoying that ride like we do when we learn the poem. We see the people coming in and out, and we see, why do we criticize these people? They're doing their best. They're marrying. They're trying to be happy, even if all ends up in this glory. No, we refuse. You know, that thing that somebody said, the second marriages have the triumph of hope of reality. No, because hope is very important, and there's always hope in life. You know. We finish now?
I think
Sorry?
I think we wind up.
I can't really
I think we wind up.
Oh, okay, yes, it's time to go. Anybody wants to say the last thing?
And I just wanted to say that tiny little sort of way of looking at everyday life, I think he had a touch of the transcendental in there, and that's not to be ignored. And also there's no fixed self. You can't just pin somebody down and say that they're a sort of unhappy character or a happy character. Every morning we wake up a different person. And I think he had a real touch of the realisation of doing that himself.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We're going to finish here. The bar is open.